Hello, everybody, and welcome to Starting Small Music. I'm Justin McCormick, and you're about to hear a conversation with an artist, musician, and music industry professional on their journey and how they got to where they are today. At Starting Small, we like to take you on a journey uncovering the untold stories of your favorite songs and artists. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Just keep a smile on your face and it'll be okay. Try not to be bitter, you gotta do it either way. Keep a smile on your face and it'll be okay. So when life throws a jab, you gotta duck out of the way.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Starting Small Music Podcast. Today we have steel guitarist Reed Connolly with us. How you doing today, Reed?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem, man. So I'd like to get up, starting with your upbringing. Where did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
Well, I grew up in Pennsylvania. I've actually lived there all my life. So I grew up in southeast Pennsylvania, a town called Westchester. Okay. It's a little bit south of Philadelphia. And I grew up in a house that had a lot of music. My dad plays guitar, and my parents both love music, and they were always playing music in the house. Not really country music, though.
Yeah.
But a lot of like the Southern California rock and folk music, you know, Jackson Brown, Linda Ronstadt, Crosby Stills, Grateful Dead, stuff of that ilk, Neil Young. Yeah. So I was hearing a lot of steel guitar in that music. So I started taking guitar lessons, standard guitar, around 10.
Gotcha.
And so I was very, very into guitar, but it was when I was in college, and then I moved to the other side of Pennsylvania. I moved to Pittsburgh, which is where I live now. That's when I just took a chance and bought a lap steel.
Gotcha.
So I was about 19, and I was already very comfortable on guitar, but I was like, this is the sound that I'm really interested in, and I'm chasing. So I just pretty much on a whim just bought a lap steel and started teaching myself.
Now, going back to your upbringing, would you say that Grateful Dead and Neil Young, those artists are some of the first people that got you like interested into music? And was it the steel guitar you were hearing? Was it the lyrics?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was growing up, the music that was playing in my house I didn't really listen to the radio so much. So it was mostly my parents' music collection. So, you know, the big bands were definitely like the Talking Heads, the Clash, Fleetwood Mac. So I'm hearing a lot of different styles of slide guitar and steel guitar mixed in. And I didn't necessarily know what it was, but it was just always catching my ear. Mm-hmm. And then when I started to get more into newer music, my dad was particularly tuned into the alternative country world in the 90s. So like he had CDs from Wilco, the Jayhawks, Counting Crows, Sunvolt. So I was starting to hear more prominent steel guitar there. One of my early concert memories is he took me to see Wilco. Wow. Probably about 20 years ago. They were touring on Yankee Foxtrot Hotel, and just such an impactful concert for me. And so I really became a huge fan of theirs. And especially early on, they have a lot of pedal steel. Yeah. Now, you know, Nels Cline plays lap steel. Their latest album has a lot of country, you know, but they've just always had steel guitar in interesting ways interspersed into their music. So I think maybe that's, even though I didn't grow up listening to country music, I've just always appreciated the touch and the sound of steel guitar and where it can find its place in the song.
So you talked about when you first got your steel. Now, did you teach yourself off of Jimmy Day or Buddy Emmons tuning? And what was your decision behind that?
So that's a great question. That's some inside baseball, steel guitar questions.
Yeah. Shout out my grandpa for telling me
yes.
that.
So I started out on lap steel, and when I bought my lap steel, I was as green as could be. I didn't know the difference between lap steel and pedal steel. I didn't know the different tunings. I basically just Googled what's the best lap steel tuning to start with. It was C6, which is a very popular tuning still. I mean, I teach it to students now, and it's very prominent in Hawaiian music, in classic country, and Western swing. But it's funny because like the background where I'm coming from, what was catching my ear with like more like rock and like Americana tinges, it was not C6 at all. But that's what I learned on. That's where I kind of learned how to play with a steel, how to understand open tunings on the fretboard. So I started on that. Then I bought a dobro, learned open G tuning. And then when I got my first job and I saved up enough money, I could afford a pedal steel because, as your grandpa probably has told you, they are not cheap.
Right.
So I was one of my early heroes and influences is a man named Bob Hoffner. Really great steel guitarist based in Austin. And I met him because I was playing with this band in Pittsburgh. They're one of the biggest bands in Pittsburgh in the country music scene, the Beagle Brothers.
Totally. Yep.
And I played with them for over 10 years. So I was playing a show. We were opening for Wayne Hancock from Austin. Bob was playing steel with him at that time. I struck up a friendship with him, and he offered to help me buy my first pedal steel.
That's special.
And it was very special. And he was the one that recommended Emmons tuning and pedals. And again, I had no idea what I was getting into. I just, I'm like 22 and I'm like, I just like the sound of it. That I don't know the rest, but I'm just going to figure it out.
Now, talking about Emmons, like,
yeah,
he's actually from my hometown of South Bend, Indiana. And like, where do you think, would we even have a pedal steel without him? Like, what's his impact on the steel community?
Oh, man. Well, I just finished reading his autobiography. So if anyone's like interested in the history of steel guitar, especially from Buddy Emmons' perspective, highly recommend that book. It's fantastic. Yeah, I think his influence cannot be overstated at all. The steel guitar was already very prominent in country and Western swing at that point. And there were a lot of different companies that had the concept of what pedal steel could be. But what they thought initially was, instead of having multiple necks with multiple tunings, you would just use the pedals to switch between tunings.
Okay.
So it was more functional than performative. So you would just, if you want to play an E instead of A, you just hold these pedals down and just play the licks as if you're an E. And it's another buddy, Bud Isaacs, that came up with the first recording with Webb Pierce to play with a pedal movement. So the song is slowly, and he's using the pedal to move between an E and an A shape. And that's the sound that made pedal steel like catch on like wildfire in the 50s. Buddy, though, is the one that said, wait a second, let's take that one pedal and split it into two so that you can actually hear the different notes bending at different times.
Yeah. That's so sick.
And he, as he says in the book, he wasn't like, it's not like he was the first person to think of it, but he was one of the more popular steel guitarists at the time. He was with Lil Jimmy Dickens at the time, I believe. And he also makes the connection with Shot Jackson to found Showbud. So I think between his genius and his like business acumen, to just keep promoting the steel guitar, he absolutely made himself the most prominent figure in pedal steel history.
Now, man, I grew up on listening to like the records vinyl of John Huey, Tommy White. Who are some of your other, along with Buddy Emmons, that you think just like stand out as like icons in the country music legacy?
I'm so glad you mentioned John Huey. I wish he had more name recognition. His playing with Conway is just some of my favorite.
Yeah.
And I actually have an Emmons guitar with wooden necks, which is what he typically would play. And it just has such a warm sound. It's beautiful.
Their version
he also
of
plays
on is so crazy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I have. Oh yeah, Tommy White's amazing too. Lloyd Green, you gotta mention him. Mr. Nashville. He's still gigging and recording. There's not too many of the masters from that era of pedal steel still working.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I recently did a video with Grady Smith.
Yeah, that's what made me want to get you on the show is after I watched that interview.
That's awesome. I had a blast doing it, but I was also it's this kind of question that got me in trouble, because it was like, what are 3 pedal steel players that are the most important? And then everyone was like, well, what about him? What about him? What about him?
You found out you're like, a Paul Franklin hater. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
But as many people as I could name, it's not enough. There's just so many great players. But I think, the ones that really particularly influenced me, as you mentioned, are John Huey, Lloyd Green, Buddy, and I would also mention a newer player, Brett Resnick, who is he plays with a number of people, but probably most well known for playing with Kelsey Walden. Mm-hmm. He played with Casey Musgraves for a bit. He gigs with Wheeler Walker Jr. He's played. I mean, he is an East Nashville staple at this point, and I just love his playing. And I'm lucky to call him a friend. So,
now getting into more of your work, one of the artists you currently play for is Zach Bryan, having a monster of a year. How did you guys meet, and what's it like on the road right now with them?
So, it's a little bit of a long story, if you don't mind.
Oh no, go for it.
Okay, so I've always been playing music, and particularly I've been focusing on steel guitar for the last 15 years. But I had a 9-to-5 job at the same time. So, I live in Pittsburgh. I was playing with Beagle Brothers. I was starting to record with other bands and getting into teaching as well. So I was very much invested in being a musician, but I just didn't know how to break out and do it full time.
Yeah.
And my wife, she does web design.
Okay.
So she, I had told this to her, and she said, well, why don't you start by making a website? Try to put yourself out there, not just as a member of a band, but as you're Reed Connolly, and this is what I do.
Yeah.
So she made me a website, and then one of the first people to reach out to me was Charles Godwin.
Yeah.
And at the time, he had just put out his debut album, Seneca, and it was recorded not far from Pittsburgh.
Oh, no.
It was recorded in Beaver County. He lives in Morgantown, West Virginia. So that's only about an hour from me. And the studio is just as close. So I was invited to play a concert with his band, and I got along really well with everyone. And we did a couple more gigs. This is in 2019. And I was starting to feel like, you know what, this might be like my ticket to doing music full time.
Yeah.
Because his album was really starting to catch some traction. It's got great pedal steel on it by Eric Haywood. And then 2020 happened. So luckily I still had my job. but we also recorded Charles' second album during lockdown, How the Mighty Fall. So we recorded that album, and then in 2021, that's when he came to us and said, guys, I'm going to start booking a national tour, and I want the whole band to be there. I'm going to get a Sprinter van, and I'm going to take you guys all over the country. And so that's what put me into position where I was like, well, I've got to take a leap of faith.
Yeah.
I had a nice cushy job, but this is what I really wanted to do. And so, I talked to my family, and I talked to my wife and my friends, and everyone said, well, it's about time. Go for it. So I took the chance. I took the leap. This was last July, 2021. And I love playing with Charles Godwin. I just can't say enough good things about him as a person, as a songwriter. Our band, the Allegheny High, so many good musicians and good people in it. I'm so lucky to play with them. And he got on Zach's radar. So Zach started talking about him online, and we were like, whoa, this is crazy.
Yeah.
So I guess they started talking, and they were trying to find a show where Charles could open for him.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up booking 3 weeks with him.
Wow.
And it was insane because, at that point we were playing to probably 100, 150 people at the most. And we get to our first Zach show. It's in Raleigh, North Carolina, sold out, 2,000 people screaming every word. I had never seen anything like it.
Jeez, that's sick.
It really took me back. So, we start going on the road with his band. I get very friendly with everyone in his crew. They're all super nice, great people. And by the end of the year, kind of out of the blue, Zach asked me, do I want to record with him? I've got a song in mind that I want steel guitar on. And it was Something in the Orange.
No way.
And at first I thought, I didn't know if he was joking or because I was not expecting it at all. Mm-hmm. And he was just like, no, I want to fly you out. I want to record. We're recording in Seattle, and let's do it. And so, I went, and I thought, this is amazing. I'm so lucky that I get to record this one song with him.
Yeah.
So then at the start of this year, Zach was a surprise guest at one of our shows in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. He opened for Charles solo. And I was like, Zach, do you want to try playing Something in the Orange, and I'll just accompany you with what I did on the recording? He's like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
So we do it. Sounds great. And, we're about to take a break because Charles had his second child in February. And then again, out of the blue, Zach texts me and says, hey, do you want to play with my band in February? Okay. And I was like, do you mean just play Something in the Orange? Or he's like, no, play everything. I was like, okay. And the first two shows were Webster Hall in New York and the Ryman.
Wow.
So I was a little bit scared and spooked, but I was excited. So I, listened to the songs, figured out parts for all of them. And I had seen the band play many times, so I knew how they sounded live. And after playing a couple shows, he was like, look, anytime you're not with Charles, I want you here.
That's sick.
And I was like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
So, the whole thing is very surprising, but it's amazing how it's worked out. And especially because a good part of this year, Charles has been opening for Zach.
Mhm.
So I get to play both sets.
Now, going off that, your nickname is Two Show because of that. How do you stay energized in between both sets? You know, having to come back and forth. Like, do you have to drink an energy drink in between the sets, or is it just like the love of playing that just makes you want to go back out there?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me about that, and honestly, I get so energized playing music, it never feels draining to me. The other aspects of touring are draining, like travel, not knowing where you are when you wake up, and like where do I go find the bathroom, and like just kind of getting reoriented with your surroundings every day. Those are the draining things, and I'm also trying to teach, and I'm also trying to be a good husband, and be a good son, and a brother, and all these things while I'm on tour. So it's the juggling of life that's more draining, but playing music is never draining for me. I love it, and I could play more sets.
Wow. Now, on top of all that, you also have your own project, Reed Connolly and his Con Artists. You've released some crazy good Christmas music for everybody.
Oh, wow.
What was the idea for that? And do you have plans to keep releasing stuff?
I am honored that you mentioned that.
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. So the genesis of that is as I said earlier in the show, my dad has a large CD collection. My parents love music, and my dad has a particularly large Christmas music collection. Mm-hmm. Like he has like well over 100 CDs of just Christmas music. So it might just be how I was raised, but I've always found Christmas music very interesting because it is like super niche in one sense, that it's about, one holiday, but at the same time, you can put any style, any genre, any spin on it you want. And so I had this idea of making a Western swing type Christmas record. And where I come from lyrically, I would say is like comedy.
Yeah.
I like to write from a comedic sense. I think probably my earliest music hero is Weird Al.
Oh, cool. Yeah, yeah.
So I just love the intersection of comedy and music, and I thought this would be the perfect avenue to explore it in a Western swing sense. So right now I just have a single. I just have 2 songs, but I have other songs I've written that I do want to record when I get off the road.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's awesome that you brought that up. Thank you.
Now, you also, this probably was before you got on the road. You composed for 2 PBS documentaries. How did that come about? And like, did they just give you kind of like an outline of what the vibe they're going for, and you just submit a bunch of tracks? What's the process like?
Yeah. So there's a pretty well-known documentarian in Pittsburgh. His name is Rick Seaback, and he's made numerous documentaries for PBS. And his style is what's called a scrapbook documentary. So basically, he will like take a trip, and he'll take footage and create a narrative around the trip. So his like the 2 documentaries I did for him, one was about pie places. So he's traveling all across the country, just visiting different places and how they make pies. Okay. It's like taking a very simple concept, but then seeing all the different nuances and developments that occur all throughout different parts of the country.
For sure.
The second one's about bakeries. So same thing. It's like how different people approach being a baker or making bread. Mm-hmm. So he is a fan of the Beagle Brothers, the band I played with in Pittsburgh. And so we had struck up a friendship, and I had expressed to him that I aspire to writing music for movies or TV, and he offered to have me do this for his shows. So basically, I would go sit with him, and he would talk about the inner styles that he wanted to write for.
Yeah.
And he'd be like, "It's this long. This is the vibe I want. Make something."
Yeah.
So it's very, very different style of writing music. It's like writing for a commercial or something. It's like you have to write for a certain length and to express a certain emotion. And something that's not going to pull away too much from what he's saying. But it was a really fun exercise for me. And I'm very proud of it. And I would love to do more of that in the future.
Another thing I want to touch on is, what do you think is it that makes like the steel guitar community like so special and like close knit? You have the Steel Guitar Forum, the Steel Guitar conventions every year, and it just seems like there's no like cool kids table. Everyone's sitting at the same table together, picking each other's brains. What do you think it makes it that everyone is like that in the steel guitar?
You said it perfectly. I really don't feel like there are big egos. I don't feel like there are people like gatekeeping or trying to vibe you out in the steel world. It is such a small niche community. Like there's no way to tell for sure how many steel guitarists there are. I read a figure one time that there's 50,000 people in the whole world. Think about how small that is.
Right.
That's not even 1% of America. That's less than 1,000% of the world.
Yeah.
It's so small. And so I think the people that are keeping it alive and are passionate about it, they generally are like me. They're like very like nerdy, and they want to just know a lot and are just passionate about it. And so when we meet each other, we just love sharing knowledge and discussing our experiences. You know, I just met a steel guitarist that I've admired for a while, Neil Jones, who plays an American Aquarium. And I follow him on Instagram, but I just met him in person for the first time. And it's like, we talked like we were like old buddies, because it's just like having that common tongue of steel guitar. You know, we know what it's like, and we know what we're kind of striving for and what we're fighting against, and the search for tone and like, you know, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I love it. I mean, because I see in other worlds like how there is like a little bit of like bullying and gatekeeping, and it's demoralizing to me. You know, that's not how I am as a person. I'm not a competitive person. I'm only competitive with myself. But to me, I feel like we all have a place here. Like I've used this metaphor before, where I feel like everyone that plays steel guitar is on the same path.
For sure.
And different people are at different points of the path. You know, some of my students are at the start of the path, and like Paul Franklin is like very, very far down the path, and I'm somewhere in between. But the point is that we're all on the same path, and that you can always advance and reach out and seek the knowledge of other people for help.
For sure. Now, I like to close all my interviews asking, what's a piece of advice that you would give to younger players out there, something you've learned along your journey that would help them get to where you are now?
Well, I think the two things I would say is it's never too late. Like, my story is very odd. I'm in my mid-30s and I just switched into playing music full time.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, I'm the old man in Zach's band, and I don't care. I love it. I'm having a blast. Everyone is so friendly and respectful to me. I mean, we just played in Pittsburgh last night, and my parents came to see Zach for the first time. Awesome. And he was passing around a poster before the show, and he was having everyone in Zach's band signed it, everyone in Charles' band signed it. And I thought, oh, this is going to be for the venue. And then he gave it to my parents.
Oh, wow.
And I was like very touched, you know.
That was nice.
So I would say it's never too late to follow your dreams and make a pivot in your career. And the other thing I would say is always lead with kindness, because that's what's worked for me. You know, everyone's going through different things out here in the world, and we need to be respectful of that. But when we're talking about, you know, your profession and the connections you make with people, work hard and lead with kindness. That's my motto, and that's what has worked for me.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment, and check out my music on all streaming platforms at Justin McCormick. See you guys next time.